Section 6. And for the other grand character of consent with antiquity, which they vaunt so much of, among those that either have not learning to search into the ancients, or wit to judge of what they read, to say nothing of this, that the hoary head of antiquity is not to be respected, if it be not found in the way of righteousness. Evil doctrines or habits, the more ancient, the worse, and the inveterateness of a disease, is no commendation to it. He that shall please to look into the Fathers with his own eyes, or peruse the discourses of our learned authors upon this point, such as Reynolds, Jewell, Whitaker, Chalmer, Dalius, Albertinus, Usher, Morton, Morney, Rivet, and multitudes more, will soon discover the impudence of this plea, and the fruit of their labors would quickly appear in the world. But for that piece of their imposture, that as they deny the reading of the Scripture to laymen, so they forbid the reading of our Protestant authors to their scholars, excepting such whose consciences they find to be of a Jesuitical complexion, and free from the heresy of tenderness. Section 7. I know it will be said that we want diverse of those marks which they have, as duration, amplitude, visible succession, union among ourselves and with the Pope. But although the Papists have no colorable pretense to those characters, among such as will inquire into the verity of their assertions, and not greedily swallow down all of them, though in point of duration, diverse of the most material doctrines of the present Romish Church are so far from it, that they stand convicted of novelism by the confession of their own authors. And for amplitude, notwithstanding all their intolerable boasting with the credulous vulgar, the learned know, the Church of Rome containeth not 1/3 part of the Christian world. And for the succession, their own authors have acknowledged frequent and long interruption, yea, even in the Papal See. Yet if all that might be granted upon those points, yet if all that might be said upon those points were superseded, if they grant us, or we can prove the former, that is, that the miracles confirm our doctrine, the Fathers profess our faith, that the efficacy, purity, and excellency of doctrine belongs to us, we do not matter the rest, nor will the reader who is satisfied in the former, but be at all startled at the latter. Section 8. Thirdly, consider what rotten pillars most of these are upon which the Church of Rome leans, and you will find they need no Samson to pull them down, one of them excepted, which Bellarmine therefore puts in the first place, and that is, from the name of Catholic, as being grounded upon that infallible maxim, conveniunt rebus nomina sepe sus, that therefore cannot be resisted. I only blame Bellarmine's oversight, that being so hard put to it, to prove the sanctity of his church, he did not prove it from the title of holiness given to the head of it. And then here had been a pair of demonstrations, not to be paralleled, in all elucid. Section 9. And for several other marks, there is this inexcusable error in them, that they allege those notes to prove the Church which are altogether impertinent and ridiculous, if you do not presuppose the Church. So they wisely suppose. What they see they cannot prove. I instance in duration, antiquity, unity, amplitude, succession, against which I thus argue. Either these do prove the being of the Church wherever they are, and the want of a Church where they are absent, or they do not. If they do not, then they are absurdly brought to prove their Church. If you say they do, then where those characters are found, there is a true Church, and where they are wanting, there is no Church. But either one nor the other is true. Not the first, for there is not one of those now mentioned, but have agreed to pagans or heretics. Who knows not the antiquity, duration, amplitude, and unity of the pagan religion? All those were the arguments of the heathens against the Christians, and the Papists have these arrows out of their quiver. And to say truth, it is but unreasonable, that they that have borrowed so much of their religion and worship from the pagans should also borrow their arguments. For you know the accessory follows the principal. The only wonder is how those arguments which were weak and absurd in the pagans, and so judged and rejected by the ancient fathers, are become strong in the Papists. But I know a reason for that too. The Pope pretends to a dignity upon earth, and consequently he can make weak things strong, And as the authority of the Romish Church is infallible, so their arguments are without all doubt irresistible. Who knows not that the Arian heresy overspread the world? That the mystery of iniquity which began to work in St. Paul's days was not to be finished and destroyed until Christ's second coming, 2 Thessalonians 2. That there was a time when the whole world wondered after the beast. And for the latter branch, who knows not that the Christian church was a true church when it wanted those characters, or at least diverse of them, when it was in its infancy, and therefore could not have had duration, when confined to a narrow room, Acts 1, and therefore had no amplitude, and consequently these are no necessary marks nor certain discoveries of the true church, as the popish doctrine makes their simple proselytes believe. So succession of pastors signifies nothing, unless you presuppose the truth of the church, whereof they are pastors, which forceth their own authors to confess that without true doctrine there is no true succession, and that a local succession alone without a profession of sound doctrine is no certain note. So Stapleton. And Bellarmine ingenuously acknowledgeth that this argument of succession is brought by them chiefly to prove that there is no church where there is no succession, from whence it doth not follow, saith he, necessarily that the church is there where succession is. So if this argument should possibly disprove our church, yet it doth not prove theirs. Section 10. So for unity. It is a shoe will fit every foot, and hath been urged by pagans, whose great argument against Christianity was taken from the divisions of Christians and the unity of pagans in their religion. And the fathers answered the pagans, as we do the papists, that as the Church of God is one, so the devil's Babylon is one, as St. Austin expresseth it, and that unity without verity is not to be regarded. It was no argument of the verity and infallibility of the Jewish Church that they were united against Christ, nor was it an evidence that the Church of Corinth, Galatia, and others mentioned in the New Testament were not the true churches of Christ, because they were pestered with fearful divisions and worse opinions than those which are owned by any divines of the Protestant confession. But if this test were allowed, if things be weighed, they would have little benefit by it. I know there is nothing more familiar with the Romanists than to possess silly, seduced creatures with an opinion of their unity and our divisions. I wish the latter were not more evident than the former. God open the eyes and humble and forgive those who by causing divisions and offenses among us have laid this stumbling block in their way. It is no wonder they that cannot examine things are deceived with words. But if any discreet person look within the veil and compare their condition with ours, he will find Clodius, accusant, make us, and that they do as if a man infected with the leprosy should reproach one who was troubled with an itch, or as if a man whose hand was cut off should quarrel with another for having a scratch on his finger. As for our churches, I know it is usual for the papists to charge us with the frantic opinions of Quakers, the desperate heresies of Socinius, and the likes. But they would take it ill if we should charge their religion with all the blasphemous, atheistical, heretical opinions of some that have lived amongst them. Their own consciences tell them that these, though they are among us, yet they are not of us. He that would judge righteous judgment must take his estimate from the public confessions of the Protestant churches, whose harmony is published and proved to all the world, and such of our learned doctors as adhere to it. And there he shall find the diversities of opinions amongst us are only in some lesser points, happily about government or other circumstantial things. But it is most certain and undeniable that all of them do hold the head and agree in all the fundamental points of religion. But on the other side, what if there be cloven tongues in Protestant churches? Is Rome a city at unity within itself? How come we then to hear the noise of axes and hammers among the builders of their temple? 300 differences have been collected out of Bellarmine's words and works, and several of them of greater importance than any of our divisions.